This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Tuesday, March the 5th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. He's produced the program. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air to discuss whatever's on your mind, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Well, as you heard Ben mention, and if you're living in this part of the province, absolutely glorious blue sky day out there. Not too cold. We've seen a lot of snow melting over the last couple of days. Not to say we're not going to still get Sheila's brush come storming in at some point during this month, but the mornings are noticeably brighter. It's brighter later in the evening, so we're on the home stretch here to get through this bit of winter. All right, so I suppose you're probably watching the Briar. Curling is a big sport here in the province, and of course, we're blessed to have some of the best curlers in the world representing this province again at the Briar in the form of Team Guju. Now, Team Simmons and Newfoundland and Labrador, they're having a decent outing, yet to crack through and get a win under their belt, but Guju yesterday, when you look at the schedule, so he's got Jamie Cooey in the morning representing the Territories, Northwest Territories, and Kevin Cooey, the four-time champion in the evening. Lo and behold, loses 7-5 to the Territories. The first time the Territories have ever beaten Team Canada at the Briar. So last night was pretty much do or die. And Guju and the boys bounced back, 8-3 victory over Team Kevin Cooey to stand at their record at 3-2. It would have been over. I mean, 3-2 is only good for fourth place in the pool. And come Thursday, at the end of the game, the end of play on Thursday, the top three teams in each pool of 9 advance to Friday's playoffs, and then hopefully we move on to Saturday's page format, and then Sunday the Briar will be decided. More than just the Briar title on the line, the winner of the Briar goes on to represent Canada at the World Championships March 30th to April 7th in Switzerland. And if they finish if whoever represents Canada finishes in the top 6 at the Worlds, they automatically qualify for one of the Olympic trial berths as well. So go get them, Guju. They got none of it today, 4:30 Island time, I believe. Anyway, there's a lot on the line. Quick note, on this date in history, one of my faves of all time, the late, great Mike Bossy became the first NHLer to score 50 goals in 8 straight seasons. That was on this date in 1985. And this one's a little bit off the beaten track. Dave, do you go bowling ever? Dave goes bowling sometimes. I hadn't bowled in years, but went and played a couple of games last week. It is really difficult, number one, and it is hard on the body. You know, you're using muscles that you really don't normally use unless you're an extremely active athlete. So just saw this interesting bowling note pop up. So it was on this date, 1924. A fella from Buffalo, New York named Frank Caruna became the first to bowl 2 successive perfect 300 games in league play. His 4-game total of 1,115 became a record that stood for 50 years. And then I see some other really weird sort of bowling stats out there. There's this fella who threw 9 strikes in less than 1 minute, which is a Guinness World Record, but bowling, T-ball. What do you think? You want to talk about it? Let's go. All right, let's move on. So yesterday, the big infrastructure announcement. A new high school for Paradise. I sometimes wonder about the political calculation for these types of announcements that have very little to zero details. So we knew at some point in the near future there was very likely going to be a high school built in the town of Paradise. I mean, we see 1,500 students that moved via bus to Mount Pearl and CBS. There will be questions about what becomes of the student enrollment numbers at the high schools. Now, in CBS is bursting at the seams. In Mount Pearl, maybe some questions now being asked in Mount Pearl about what that looks like and what that means for their high schools. But with the announcement, that was absolutely zero details. We don't know where it's going to be built. We don't know when it's going to be built. We don't know how many students are going to be housed in this high school. The benchmark is 600. But if you're looking at 600 versus the 1,500 being bussed out, then still some pretty major questions. It's not the first time that this type of education infrastructure announcement has been made like this. For instance, I'm looking out the window at Kenmount Terrace. There's a school forecasted to be built in this growing and young community in Kenmount Terrace. Problem? We don't know how many students. We don't even know what grades will be dealt with inside that school proposed for right across the street from my studio this morning. So there's, a welcomed announcement for the folks in Paradise who had been leading the charge. The founder of the group, Kayla Quinlan, obviously quite chuffed. And the minister says, as a result, and this is a pretty good one too, as a result of the factual data supplied by this group of advocates and parents in Paradise, that it made the decision easy. But the information, the data, the government already had. The government had it because we know full well that when there was a hierarchy list put forward as to what schools will be built where, Paradise was at the top of the list. So yes, good on Kayla Quinlan and everyone else who came storming in behind her in throes of support, but that's sort of a strange way to put it, that because of the information supplied, they were able to make this decision. It's one-hand applause coming. We'll see what becomes of it. You know, Paul Dinn, of course, he's been advocating for that area as well, and as the opposition critic, we really need to know more. Now, maybe, I suppose, in the interest of fairness, with the budget pending, I guess we'll know a bit more about what the government thinks about how much they'll spend on this school. Will give us a better idea with how many students will be in the school. We wonder whether it'll come with things like the replacement for the penitentiary, what the affordability ceiling will be, because schools don't get built overnight, but I guess it's a good news announcement, so there you go. And sticking with the world of education, it's been a tumultuous stretch for Memorial University. You know, we had a president ousted. There was a strike amongst the faculty members. And now the folks represented by the Lecturers Union, they are poised to strike. So it's the Lecturers Union of Newfoundland and Labrador. They have voted overwhelmingly in favour. So 75% of the 200 members turned out to vote. 90% voted in favour of job action. So it has been quite a roller coaster at Memorial University, not in the best interest of the administration or the staff, and most importantly, the students. So it comes if and when there's a strike, picket lines, and then big decisions have to be made. So they get paid woefully little. So here's the issue. They get between $5,000 and $5,875 per course per semester. They have absolutely the same workload as their colleagues represented by MUNFA, but here's the offer being made by Memorial University. This comes from Chad Pelly, the Manager of Communications and Media Relations. 46% of lecturers at the bottom of the income scale, those making $5,000 per semester, would be bumped up to $7,312 a semester. Meanwhile, those making the top range of $5,875 will begin collecting $7,312 per semester. Okay, I don't think those numbers are right. But there you go. It's in line with the Atlantic Canadian universities. We'll see what becomes of it, but I think that some of the frustration because of the deferments and deferrals of meetings time and time again and the lack of information being shared, that they're probably pretty poisoned, but we'll see if they accept that particular offer in line with the rest of the Atlantic region, and off we go. Okay. So, when we talk about the oil business, you know, there's still lots out there. We had Darren King on reminding about the importance of the work that could and should be done at Bull Arm. Then we know that we're all anticipating some sort of decision gate from Equinor regarding Bay du Nord. But there's another interesting one, is the Auditor General. And we always enjoy having Denise Hanrahan on the program. Apparently she's been waiting for about 3 years to get some information from the government to determine the cost of shutting down the oil projects, so the decommissioning cost. Good question. Because we also know when the province is looking out at the market to see what the value of the equity stake that we hold in the offshore fields. So I don't even know if it's a good idea to have an equity stake in the oil fields, because it does indeed have a direct implication with the amount of royalties that come in the door. And yes, you know, when oil is $100 a barrel or more, there is some math out there that displays equity stake is not a bad idea, but it does come with responsibility at the end of life. So just for a reminder, the government has a 4.9% equity stake in Hebron, 8.7% equity position in Hibernia South, and a 5% stake in the White Rose Extension project. We do know that they're floating out. The province hasn't committed to selling off its assets, even though it was recommended in the Green Report and very likely also in the Rothschild Report, which we're not allowed to see for some unknown reason. So there's still a lot there. And with the Green Report, it was the roadmap forward for economic prosperity. And so we'll see if the selling off of assets in the oil business is part of it. But there's still the big ones out there. And maybe I'm in the minority that dwell on these types of issues. But if we're told we're putting so much stock in these reports, where's the action on them? For instance, with the Newfoundland and Labrador Liquor Corporation. That what gets people going publicly. Because the NLC returns over $200 million per year to the provincial government coffers. Even if they sell off the entirety of the NLC or in bits and parts, there's still tax on booze, so the monies will still flow, maybe to that extent, but if you want to take it on, what that means for the number of jobs, the rate of pay, the competition that it would present, we'll take it on. Speaking with reports, the Health Accord. So inside the Health Accord, there was a recommendation that there would be only one obstetrics unit in Central, and that would be in Grand Falls, Windsor. And now the province, with the pressure coming from the mayor and other families in Gander, there will indeed be a reinstatement of obstetric services. They'll start resuming that service at the James Payton Memorial Hospital 8 a.m. on Monday, March the 18th. Now, they've got 3 out of the 4 obstetricians on staff. They're also going to be supported by midwifery and nursing teams at the ready at that facility. So, again, all the great work done and the due diligence provided, whether it be by the Green Report team and or the Health Accord and their subcommittees, how closely will they follow the recommendations that have been brought forward? They've said pretty much that they will follow all or as much as possible, but the obstetrics unit, good news for the folks living in Gander or close by Gander or closer to Gander than they are to Grand Falls, Windsor. Okay, let's see here. What does this mean? Okay. I spoke to this one with Jerry Lynn Mackey on the VOCM Morning Show, and here comes tax time. Not great. A couple of tax-related notes. If you want to get your carbon tax rebate on April the 15th, you have to have your taxes filed by March the 15th. If you don't file by March the 15th, doesn't mean you're not going to get your April rebate. It'll just be processed later after they process your taxes. But if you want to make sure you get the carbon tax rebate on the 15th of April, you got to do your taxes a week from now, or just over a week from now by March 15th. Also, when it comes tax time, this is a story that's a little bit old, but I think is still worthy of conversation. And you wonder where the province is on this front. When we talk about organ donation, in some provinces, it's not about opting in. In this province, you go through MCP to acknowledge that you are willing and wanting to be an organ and tissue donor. And then, of course, importantly, you have to have that conversation with your family. So the opt-out requires an awful lot of work to be done on the ground before that's a manageable, reasonable approach to be taken in this province. But there was a private member's bill brought forward in the House of Commons, and it's extremely difficult for a private member's bill to get through, but this one passed unanimously. Why? Because it's a good idea. So it's a Conservative member of Parliament representing Calgary. His name is Len Weber. He was the sponsor of Bill C-210. What it says is that there will be a simple box to check on your tax form that says you are willing to be an organ donor, as opposed to going through the other rigmarole. As a result, this was just in Ontario and Nunavut, almost 2.5 million Canadians signed up to say they would indeed do this. It's a similar process to when you check the box to say to CRA, please do feel free to share my information with Elections Canada, for instance, so that the voting list could be updated. So if the result is quite clear, 2.5 million Canadians added to the organ donor list, we know that hundreds die a year waiting for an organ donation, and some of this information is gleaned by Canadian Blood Services. When polled, it's always about the same number. 90% of Canadians say they're willing to be an organ donor, but only 25% of Canadians are actually registered to do exactly that. So I think that's a super idea. And, well, the results and the proof is in the pudding. One tax season, 2.5 million Canadians were added to the registry. Okay. How are we doing out there, Dave? As you can imagine, some of the issues regarding travel nurses was up for debate in the opened legislature yesterday. Okay, so the province is committed to moving away from the reliance on travel nurses. No date affixed. But the looming question would be, if there's no travel nurses, then who? That we can have the conversation about the job offers being offered to nursing students. Some of them are really quite frustrated that they hear all of these problems and gaps and shortages, yet not being offered full-time permanent jobs, have been offered temporary full-time jobs, but not the permanent, which might be some concern regarding benefits, but I don't think that's the case because a full-time nurse gets the same benefits whether it be temporary or full-time. That's my understanding. In addition, this is a weird one. So the demolition is happening to knock down the Grace, and that site apparently is not going to be big enough to take on the replacement for St. Clair's, if and when that ever happens in the near future. And if that land is not for St. Clair's, then used for what? Housing, possibly. This is a strange one that came on a scrum outside the House of Assembly yesterday. Newly minted Housing Minister Fred Hutton was asked a pretty fundamental question by Justin Brake from The Independent. And he asked this question of Jim Dinn, Tony Wakeham and Fred Hutton. And Minister Hutton was unable to answer this question. Is housing a human right? It is by international and Canadian law. Now, of course, how you enshrine that right and what that means for a secure place to live without the fear of being evicted is basically the summary of the definition. And the minister responsible for housing was unable to say just yes or no. It's a bit of a rocky start, because there's no doubting Canadian and international law regarding housing being a fundamental human right. It's well understood. Now, of course, housing is complicated, and we know that the country has been on the wrong track for decades. But even the acknowledgement that, yes, housing is a human right doesn't put any additional pressure on the government, because the pressure is already there. It can't be any higher or more intense. So, yes, to aid the government in their view on housing, it is absolutely 100% enshrined in law that housing is a right, a human right. But unable to say just a yes or no to that question is, I don't really understand the backstory as to why just not say yes. Because I assume the political calculation is, if I say yes, then we ramp up the pressure, we turn up the temperature. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, you can't build a house overnight. I think people understand when they stand back that, it's going to take some time to get this all dealt with in full. So the pressure's already there. So let's acknowledge, in unison, that housing is absolutely a human right. When we get housing right and we get education right, a lot of the other problems that we deal with are going to be much more manageable, I would suggest. 1 second break for a sip of coffee. We're back. All right, a couple of quickies. So we know that the federal budget is going to be brought down on the 16th of April. Not sure about the provincial budget as of yet. And as we know, last year there was a $40.1 billion deficit. The forecast a $35 billion deficit this year. When making mention of this, the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, they all do it, is talking about, opening up the gates for opportunity and prosperity for who? The middle class. If anyone's got a definition of who is in the middle class these days, I'd be more than happy to have it. Because it's one of those political throwaways that feels good, sounds good, but has become more and more meaningless over time, because the target for who's actually in the middle class these days, I have no idea. Am I in it? Dave, are you in it? Dave doesn't know either, because I don't know either. So anyway, the federal budget coming on the 16th of April. Inside that budget, people will be keeping a close eye as to where the government is on military spending. Some fascinating public polls. Now, as faithful listeners to the program, I don't talk about opinion polls very often. But when it becomes a big trend, and I'm not talking about horse race polls and political popularity polls, issues regarding topics of importance. So get a load of this. This is from an Angus Reid Institute poll. 29% are choosing military preparedness and the country's place on the world stage as their top political priority. A decade ago, that figure was just 12%. More and more Canadians are looking at the need or the want or the possibility for the federal government to spend what is the NATO benchmark of 2% of GDP on military spending. Currently, it's about 1.27 or 1.29, somewhere in that neighborhood, so a long way away from 2. It has been leaked many times that the Prime Minister says the country will not get to 2%. Mr. Poilievre, when asked, has the same position that former Prime Minister Harper has had, is that the country will work towards 2%, not a firm commitment to that. But that's remarkable. For the top priority for 29% of the country to say the military spending is their top political priority, I guess some of that comes from the presumptive Republican candidate for president talking about what was really quite a strange comment about 2%, and to say the United States will not back its allies if and when countries like Russia attack one of the members of NATO. You know the story. But anyway, 29% of the country say military spending is their top priority. Interesting stuff. I wonder, should we just change what military spending sounds like and looks like? If it does not include the modern warfare of cyber security, then I'll be monkey's uncle. Because no longer is it really firmly dealt with and fought in the trenches. It's fought digitally in large part. So we should expand the definition of military spending to include cybersecurity. I mean, just look no further than the weather Meditech system here. The city of Hamilton has been crippled for over a week because of a hack and a ransomware attack. So cyber protection for our own personal privacy and for the compilation of government data held digitally, which can be easily compromised. We've all learned that the hard way in this province. But anyway, there you go. Oh, and speaking of Hamilton, WestJet is going to continue with a 5 times a week service between St. John's International and Hamilton. That's going to be run from the middle of May to the middle of October, so good news for the travelling public. Although that service used to be operated by Swoop, the attraction there was a pretty reasonable airfare. Wonder what it's going to look like under WestJet, which has absorbed Swoop. Unlikely it's going to be the same reasonable price point. We're on Twitter. where VOCM Openline follows there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Our faves when you join us live on the air like Diane. She's going to start off talking about the travel nurses. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Diane. You're on the air.
Good morning, sunny morning.
Lovely morning.
Before I get to the nurses, do you remember 11 or 12 years ago the government was in a conundrum about everybody double doctoring and getting street drugs and all that?
I do, yeah.
And they were going to get 3 or 4 committees and 2 dozen lawyers. And I happened to say, I lost it one day. My brother was there, and he was in a position to tell other people, not me. I said, what are you talking about? Everyone already got their own numbers, their MCP numbers. They don't need to spend 12 or 15 million to their friends to find that out.
No, it was a matter of keeping the records digitally, right? That was the big problem here, is before the other doctors found out that you had just got a prescription from Dr. J, and then you went to see Dr. K, Dr. K didn't know you already got it from J. But now when we've registered these things digitally, it's much cleaner and it's much easier to find out what kind of prescriptions you've been having.
They use the MCP numbers to keep track of it.
That's right, but MCP is a billing process, right? So by the time these things make its way to MCP in a fax or in the mail or however they've been transferring the information, by the time that gets acknowledged, one patient could have seen 5 or 6 doctors. So that was the problem, is that there was a gap in time before the MCP and or other doctors knew he'd been receiving a prescription of one opioid or another. Yeah.
Well, anyway, in my opinion, this business of the traveling nurses is the same thing. They said this morning, one of the politicians or the newscasters, there's no easy fix to it. Well, there's a simple fix to it. All they got to do, the nurses won't give up their 12-hour shifts because of their shift premium and overtime. Start the nurses off at that rate. I don't mean a student nurse getting the same pay as a 25-year nurse, but start them off at a good pay. Cut their shifts back to 8 hours so there's not so many mistakes being made. And if all across Canada did that, traveling nurses would only be needed in isolated places.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to fill some jobs in some areas, and that's one of the comments that came from the minister, right? When the nursing students were saying they were dismayed that they weren't being offered permanent full-time jobs, and the minister says, well, they have to temper their expectations because not everyone's going to get to work at 4 North B at the Health Sciences. So some places...
they got to hire people on, see if they're going to work out, give them a trial period.
That's part of it, of course.
Well, I just think that just about, and those numbered companies that the politicians hide behind while they're creating these businesses, they can't do anything about them civil rights-wise, but Newfoundland can stop dealing with them.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry? The numbered companies?
The numbered companies, no one knows who owns the companies, only them and their lawyers.
But when it comes to this travel nurse issue, we know exactly who the company is.
Do you know who the owner is?
Yeah, I've seen his name. I can look it up again, Canadian Health Labs. But there's tons of information about them out there, what they do, where they do it. You can get quotes on rates from them. So they're not a hide-behind company like we see. You know, remember, one of the number company issues that people were talking about here was who owned that land where that canopy facility was built, because that was a numbered company. And by law, they don't even have to register who the directors are. In that case, it was simply their lawyer.
They don't have to register anything, only the name, only the number.
That's right.
They should be outlawed here if nowhere else.
Well, numbered companies are not a problem in and of themselves, but if you're doing business with the government, it should be important, and I would suggest required, that we know who the companies are. We'll agree on that front. Like if I have a numbered company that I do my own personal business with, and it's not with the government, then it shouldn't really be an impact on anybody, because I would be doing it up front. And
I'm only talking about government business, not...
Sure.
I'm talking about some government department having 4 or 5 committees and taking 2 or 3 years, and all their friends making millions of dollars while people are here waiting on them to do the simplest thing that they could have done in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's probably 4 or 5 different places where we can talk about nursing shortages and or healthcare professional shortages, period. Some of it's pay, but, you know, stand back once again and we think about the money. If money was the only issue, then we'd probably be okay, because it was tried to move, say, for instance, nurses who were casual nurses onto the full-time roster, and they were dangling a $3,000 bonus to just do that, and very, very few took it on. So I think when you listen to Yvette Coffey, for instance, the retention issue is more than money. Now, of course, money makes the world go round. An increase in pay makes it much more likely I stay in my job. But it's a variety of things at the workplace, which Miss Coffey says is as big a problem as anything concerning how much they make.
Well, the thing of it is, if they take, what did you call it, the $3,000?
Yeah, there was a bonus that they offered to casuals.
Bonus, they're obligated to work the hours that they're given. If they don't take the bonus, they can just work the 2 days a week they want it to work.
Yeah, the casuals have much more flexibility. You're right.
So, like I said, with no bonuses, just give them a good pay. Who wants to leave home?
You mean who wants to leave whatever community they're from? For instance, if I'm from St. John's, why would I want to leave?
Newfoundland. Who, you know? Like that old joke. How can you tell the Newfoundlanders in heaven? You're the only one that's saving up for the train ticket home.
Yeah, and we have something that's already been in place prior to these travel nurses, which people focus in on that 5-month stretch last year where there was about $36 million spent. And pre-pandemic it was about $1 million per year period, not 36 in 5 months. So we've got something that's called a nursing locum already in place. You know, prior to the pandemic, if I wanted to, say I was working at St. Clair's, I could do a locum to Labrador. And, you know, go up there for a couple of weeks, get the experience of living and working in the big land, and yet that's kind of been replaced with this travel nurse issue. And now, good news, it looks like anyway, we're moving away from the reliance that we've had on travel nurses. Like the contract out west expired on the 28th of February and will not be renewed. But that doesn't answer the question of, if it's not the travel nurse taking the shift, who is? Because if the answer to that question is the nurses who are on the public roster and they're working 21-hour shifts, sure, that's no good either.
No, Patty, I got to go. I'm waiting for delivery, and I think it's here.
You got something important coming?
Yeah.
Good. Go get it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time, Diane. Here you go. I got to go accept my delivery. Good stuff. Let's take a break. When we go back, Erin's in the queue. She wants to talk about the Paradise High School announcement. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Erin Furlong. You're on the air.
Morning, Patty. How are you?
Great today. How about you?
Oh, fantastic. It's a wonderful day.
Good.
I'm calling in today just to talk about the announcement. I'm one of the members of the Parents for Paradise High School, and I just wanted to call in and, talk about how excited we are and how optimistic we are looking forward. I wanted to send out a big thank you to everybody who's been supporting us this whole time, especially our MHAs, Paul Din, Sarah Studley, and, of course, Fred Hutton, who came on as soon as he had the opportunity. So I just wanted to throw it out there that, without those people and the support of the families and the parents in our community, we wouldn't have been able to get where we are today. So I just wanted to throw a big thank you out there. And, just to talk about how excited our children are and how wonderful it was to see. I didn't understand how much it would impact, say, my 8-year-old, but to see the excitement in his face when he knew that all of him and all of his friends would get to go to school in Paradise from kindergarten to grade 12, it really made all the hard work really worth it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it just stands to reason, given the sheer numbers. If 1,500 students are being bused out to Mount Pearl and CBS, then there's a need for high school. The end. It's
100%.
It's one of the fastest growing communities in Atlantic Canada, one of the fastest growing communities in the country. So we're in a good place here. For me, though, I kind of labeled it with a one-handed applause this morning, because it's fine to tell me you're going to build one, but the real important details about where and when and to house how many, those are pretty important factors that are completely left out. So I don't understand why governments think this is a good idea to make these, these types of announcements at this moment in time. Now, I guess when we talk about how much, which will consequently relate to how many students it'll house, that'll be a budgetary matter. But even say we're going to put shovels in the ground next spring, or just something where we know that there's a timeline that we can hold them to account, because at this moment we have no idea.
Definitely, yeah. And so that's one of the other reasons I wanted to call in today, just to talk about the fact that to reassure the people of Paradise that we are not going to give up. This group just sees this as step one in the process of everything that we're going to do moving forward. We do, look forward to continuing to work well with the government and have those, positive experiences working with them. But in our minds, this is our job is not done yet. We're here for the long haul until we see that school built in Paradise.
Yeah, another comment. I'll just get your reaction to this. Look, I think what Kayla Quinlan and you and others have done here, what you've achieved, is important. And that's how democracy works, right? People who have the details, have done their work, have supplied all the issues to government, so the government is forced to make the proper decision, which they did in this case. But it was a little bit confusing for me, because the minister, I assume, just in a way to offer some congratulations on the hard work done by the committee or the group of advocates and parents to get this high school announcement. But, it's talking about all the research done and the data compiled and the submissions to government, which really pushed government to make this decision. That's information that you got from the government. I mean, the government had all this stuff in hand. So I guess it's just a way to say bravo to the advocates. But it's a strange way to couch it, because the research done is gathering government-provided data, which the government has.
Yeah, you're right. We did spend quite a bit of time, and I'll throw out there Matt Crease's name because he did a lot of hard work in that area, and he was instrumental in collecting all of that data and from multiple different areas, municipal, provincial, and putting it all in a very nicely displayed package to the government to say, like, here it is, here's all the information, you don't need to go looking for it, and it is undeniable that we do need a high school here. And when you're talking about, the numbers of students who are going to go there, our drive is to work towards getting every student in Paradise to go to school in Paradise. And that's, we're looking for the benefit for our children, but if you look at it from the bigger perspective, it also helps the children in CBS and Mount Pearl, because then they have the ability to, they'll have less overcrowding in their schools. They'll have more opportunities for the children to go there and attend the classes that they need to attend. Because as I've told you before, we've heard multiple times from parents that children are unable to take the courses that they need or that they would like to take because there's just too many kids. So the benefits are far-reaching in this announcement. So we are confident that it will continue, to the point where we actually do get the school, and we will continue to fight till we get one.
Yeah, and I guess we'll learn a lot more on Budget Day here, because that's where we'll get the details. Like last year's budget, there was the mention of the school in Kenmount and to modernise the school in Cartwright, and there was another one that escapes me at this moment in time. But good news, and we'll see where it goes from here. It would be really nice to know just how many students will be able to be going to the new high school in Paradise, because it was 1,500 and the benchmark is 600. I mean, if we had all 1,500 in the high school, and I don't know what the student enrollment numbers look like, say, for instance, 5 years down the road, but that would be a massive school.
Massive, yeah.
Absolutely massive. And then I think this is not your concern, but what does that mean for student enrollment and staffing ratios and courses and programs, for instance, in Mount Pearl? I mean, CBS needs this to happen too, because their high school is absolutely bursting at the seams. Maybe not the same case in Mount Pearl, so I wonder how all that factors in.
I think we'll have those discussions moving forward. We have been looking at those numbers and the projections and stuff like that. So that's a lot of information that we have, at our fingertips that we will be providing to the government as well. I guess just to say that we will be continuing to work with the government, and hopefully we can, get exactly what we're looking for here.
We'll see. And so congratulations to you and everyone else who was part of making this happen. Thanks for the call this morning, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too.
All right, bye-bye. Here we go. Okay, let's go. Healthcare. Line number 3 is to good morning to the PC member for Grand Falls, Windsor. Buckins has Chris Tibbs. Chris, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
Patty, I just wanted to talk about our cancer care clinic in Grand Falls, Windsor, and give some people some background on what it's going through right now. Last week, the government received a letter from the 4 doctors that run that clinic, 4 fantastic, valuable doctors, Patty. Valuable because they wanted to stay in Newfoundland and Labrador. Valuable because they're doing everything they can to stay in Newfoundland and Labrador. They sent a letter to the government saying that they aren't getting the proper supports, asking for more supports so the cancer care clinic can stay open and they can continue giving the proper care that's so needed in central Newfoundland and Labrador. It's the only place that they're offering cancer care within the clinic. Patty, they haven't received a phone call yet from the government, from the Premier, from Tom Osborne, Minister of Health and Community Services. Back in 2022, Patty, on December 14th, I wrote an email with the subject line, SOS Save Our Services. It was over 14 months ago. In that email, I said that the healthcare in Central, it is collapsing. Grand Falls Windsor is the backstop, Patty. There is no other hospital. With all these diversions and all the ERs shutting down, they have to go to Grand Falls Windsor. If anything happens at a hospital, Patty, where does that leave us? And in that email, I also specifically stated that we have internists delivering cancer care here in Grand Falls Windsor who are very unhappy, that need more support. Well, Patty, we are less than 3 weeks away from this cancer care clinic closing or these doctors walking away from it because they cannot do it anymore. And this government are sitting on their hands and they're handcuffing these doctors. And I want to know why. And yesterday I spoke about it for 10 minutes. No response from the Premier, no response from the Minister of Health and Community Services, Patty, and we are very irate in Central Newfoundland.
Help me understand exactly what the concern is here, because I hear, the need for additional support. So is that administrative support or is it technical support? I'm just still a little bit confused as to exactly what the concern is.
So basically, Patty, these doctors say that they cannot give the proper care that's needed now, Patty, because they are seeing up to 300 to 400 patients a month right now. They cannot give the proper care to these patients that these patients truly need, Patty, unless they get the support. So I think they're asking for one administrative, possibly two nurses, and a PCA.
Okay.
Somewhere along those lines, Patty. I think it was in the email that I sent you a couple of days ago, but I'll send it again now, exactly what they're in need of. But it's just support. It's 4 additional staff members to help with that workload, or they cannot give the proper care that's needed right now. And Patty, I get it. Retention and recruitment, it's tough for any government, any party. I get it. But when you have 4 doctors who have spent a lifetime here, who love Newfoundland and Labrador and are asking for these supports, and they don't get a phone call, they don't get, we'll help you with A and D. When the budget comes out, we could possibly help you with C and D. Some sort of communication, Patty. Up until yesterday, the only thing they've gotten was, you're on the radar of the government right now, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's not good enough. So, again, I've seen the email, but of course I see thousands a week. Is the concern, are they saying that if the additional supports are not provided, or at least give a timeline for when the supports may indeed be put in place, that they're going to do what? They're going to close the clinic, or they're going to leave for greener pastures? What is I'm not going to say the threat, but what's the comment?
So it's what it's come to as well, Patty. And you have to remember, so when I speak to government or when I stand or when I write emails, this is on behalf of the people in Central. This is not on behalf of me. I'm asking for help in Central. So when these doctors say, Patty, 14 months, over a year ago, we've been screaming for extra support, and this government hasn't reached out to these doctors once and offered any sort of support or even asked them what they need. So right now, these doctors who are pushed to their limit, Patty, and I know these doctors personally, and Patty, they're old school doctors. God love them, they're old school doctors. They don't know what a 40-hour work week looks like. They want to stay here. They want to continue this service. But in order to give the proper care to the patients, so nothing gets missed, so the patients walk away with the proper care they deserve, they need these extra supports. If not, then they will not be able to run this cancer clinic themselves anymore.
Well, and of course, first, do no harm. So they want to be able to provide that appropriate level of care, which I think is something that gets lost in the healthcare conversation anyway, because we'll talk about the rate of pay, the numbers of hours worked, injured on the job, shortages, unable to put out a shingle as a nurse practitioner and bill MCP, all of these types of things. But what it all boils back down to is the level and the continuity and the quality of care we're able to get as residents, as patients. Because I don't imagine that, certainly I can only speak for myself, I know how tough those jobs are. Well, I've never done them, but I can only imagine how tough the jobs are, like, for instance, being an oncologist or a nurse or a social worker or what have you. But 12, 14, 16, 20 hours into a shift, I can't possibly be on top of my game, which is a direct concern regarding quality of care and the possibility to be hurt on the job, which has obviously been a problem for the nurses as well. So, sometimes... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, sorry, Patty, you just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. They don't want to they want to make sure that there's no harm done to these patients that they care about, Patty. And listen, every person in this province has been touched by cancer in some sort of way. And Patty, I don't get it because, listen, if those supports for some reason or another can't be offered right now to these doctors that want to stay, then reach out to them and talk to them. I just don't get it, Patty, how one phone call can garner a $36 million contract from a Liberal lobbyist for 5 months, yet these doctors and myself and my community have been screaming to the top of our lungs for well over a year, and nobody can reach out to these doctors that are already here, Patty, and want to stay? How are we supposed to keep healthcare professionals here if our government continue to ignore them?
And that's when the conversation extends beyond how much they need or want to be paid. Chris, I appreciate the time this morning. We'll see. Of course, we've got a laundry list of questions for the health minister in particular. But of course, now with the government session back in the House of Assembly, there's going to be more and more of these types of conversations, and rightfully so. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Paddy. I would just say, please, to the Premier, to the Health, to the Minister of Health and Community Service, let's start taking care of the people that are taking care of the people. Get this done. Thank you, Paddy.
Thanks, Chris. All the best.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. That's Chris Tibbs. He's the PC member for Grand Falls, Windsor, Buckins. Let's take a break. Nick, you're next. Talk about what? Gas. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 4. Good morning, Nick. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. It might not sound like a whole lot of money, but when are they going to stop charging us for that 5% warm-up for combine chance now she's in full production?
Well, it's a good question, but the 5 cents is going to Silver Peak, and that's for the importation and the distribution of gasoline. The fact that Brea Renewable Fuels is up and running again really has no impact on the gas market here because they're only producing renewable diesel at this point. They're not supplying gas. Yeah. So that 5 cents, it's a fair question, but I don't know if it's going away anytime soon.
I thought it was just to keep the place warm idle, from what they said.
No, that was because we're not going to be producing any gasoline here. It was an additional price for doing business for Silver Peak. That's where my understanding is where the 5 cents lands. So unless we refine and produce gasoline here, I don't know if that goes away. But it's a question that people ask all the time, and it's a fair one.
Yeah, no, because when I worked out there, they were talking about running gasoline through it, actually, besides biodiesel.
Well, it's only phase 1. That's what they're producing now, and that's the only product coming out of that Come By Chance or Brea Renewable Fuels at this moment.
Okay, I just figured I'd mention that because I know it's not a whole lot of money I'm talking about, but for some people it actually is. And I just figured I'd run that by you in case you knew.
Well, I don't know, and I don't think anybody has ever said that there's a date where that's going to go away and how and why it goes away. But something else I'll put back out there, and maybe I'll put this in the form of a question because I can't recall at this moment in time. Has the provincial government committed to extending the break on the gas tax here, the half of the gas tax? Because if not, that was going to stop on the 1st of April, which means an additional 8 cents-ish to be added to a litre of fuel. I seem to remember that the province announced they would extend it, but I'll have to confirm it because it just popped into my head.
Just something to throw out here to our government leaders out in the Liberal government. Why not follow Alberta up there and cut out the carbon tax? That's the biggest issue we got. That's what's driving inflation across Canada. And not only that, you don't see them do it down the States. I mean, down in the U.S., someone that knows that was down there was buying gas when they were down there, 97 cents a litre Canadian. So, I mean, you know, something's got to give. You know, why are we paying for to keep the earth cool when it's not going to make any difference?
I'm not a big fan of the gas tax, or pardon me, the carbon tax as it's currently structured. But the Bank of Canada disagrees with you. The implication of carbon tax on inflation is minimal. I mean, you talk about the price of food and whatnot. There's no carbon tax in the United States, but yet their food inflation is worse than ours.
Yeah, the Bank of Canada, I wouldn't put a grain of salt in their hands. They don't know what they're at anyway. But anyways, with saying that, it'd be something for Andrew Fury and his gang to look into about eliminating if you want to get the eye of the public on their side, because people are fed up here. We pay the most for everything, and just to get stuff here, that's one of the biggest costs we got is the fuel surcharge on everything.
Well, the clean fuel regulations are unfair as they currently stand. We could pay 3 times more than other parts of the country. It makes absolutely no sense. In addition to that, I think the government is ham-fisted on the clean fuel regulations. If it's all about reducing the emissions from gasoline, then put the pressure on the bloody refineries. Not me. I have no control over the sulfur level in a litre of gas. So if that's the concern, then put the onus where it belongs for the folks that actually refine the gas. It might be more expensive, but they're making out like bandits. And here we are having to pay a clean fuel regulation, which is charged to the exact wrong person, in my own personal opinion. But you said Alberta and the carbon tax. What does that mean? I'm sorry?
Yeah, as far as I know, Alberta cut the carbon tax out.
No province has the ability to do that. The Supreme Court ruled on this one. The Government of Canada has the legal right to impose that tax. The issue that you might be referring to is in Saskatchewan, they're not going to remit the carbon tax to the federal government. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
That's probably what it is. But even so, I mean, something's got to give. I mean, they talk about inflation. I mean, mortgages are gone through the roof. Nobody can afford half of what they got. And pretty soon the bubble's going to burst, and you're going to see a lot of foreclosures, I'm assuming. People with big houses, and where's that going to get us? Nowhere.
Well,
and people with car loans. I mean, I buy and sell cars. I got a dealership as well. And over to Odessa, years ago, we used to see 1 or 2 repos going through the line. To give you an example, Patty, over to Odessa now, you're seeing 20 to 30, maybe 40 a week. That's big numbers.
Yeah, and of course, if you had a vehicle loan, that would be different than the Bank of Canada's benchmark interest rate. It's a different issue. But, business insolvencies are up. That's true and well understood by the CFIB. There are concerns about mortgage holders, but at this moment, which I find to be interesting, and these are numbers from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, is that the numbers of Canadians in 3-month arrears on their mortgage is really low. I would have thought it would be really high, but apparently not. But now there's still another 1.8 million Canadian households that have to renew their mortgage in the next 18 months. So we'll see if that 5% doesn't get reduced, and it doesn't look like it's going to at this moment in time. I guess pain is the imposed issue by the Bank of Canada in their whatever quest to control inflation. If it's at 2.9%, and I don't know if it's going to hold that again, but where does it end? Where's the upside economically speaking? You want to punish me, or will the government and individuals be able to manage at 2.9% versus 2%? I think we are pretty much stuck here with that ideological target of 2. Now, I guess the argument could be made by Tiff Macklem, but if that results in job losses, and employment numbers are not awful in the country, but even with the headline last week of how many jobs were added, it does not include the number of people participating in the labour market, which has been reduced, which doesn't get factored in. It does not include just how many part-time jobs were part of it and how many full-times were lost, which is down in the news story versus the headline saying 35,000 jobs added.
You can't knock a company for making a profit. I'll give it that. But at the end of the day, you got to look at the size of profits they're making from gas, grocery stores, department stores. I mean, when you see certain products going almost 5 times the price in about a year, I mean that's a bit alarming. I mean, I feel bad. I'm not at a point where I'm hurting, but I mean, I feel bad for these small, low-income families and those that are on low-income supports. I mean, they're going, they'll probably buy a case of Pepsi instead of a couple 2 liters of milk because it's cheaper.
Yeah, well, milk, I think there's a different conversation there again, because supply management is a national conversation that we're loath to have, apparently. But regarding profit, there are conversations about what windfall tax might look like, but as a businessman, doesn't that concern you, that so many people are asking for the government to get involved in adjudicating how much profit someone can make before there's an additional tax rate? Ooh, that's, we're opening up a can of worms there that's going to be akin to the genie escaping the bottle, unable to be ever stuffed back in.
But then when you look at it, you look at the government giving out money to these companies, like say, for instance, a gas company, out to Come By Chance, like Silver Peaks. Why give the money? They're making record profits.
I don't think Silver Peak falls into that category as record profit, but
you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, just let's talk bigger companies. ExxonMobil. We're giving ExxonMobil a $50 million break to go explore this year. Now, I know exploration potentially leads to production, and I understand that exploration is one of the key linchpins of the industry. But a $50 million break for Exxon? I don't know, man. That sounds like a lot of money. Millions of dollars for Loblaws to change out their coolers sounds like a lot of money to a pretty profitable business. $128 million loan to World Energy GH2. There was something changed there, because Mr. Risley, as recently as the summer of 22, said would not be going to the province or the feds for that type of loan, but he did.
Well, Mr. Fury's the one to answer for that one, so I don't know what else to say there.
Well, that was federal money.
Yeah, I know, but, like I said, his father was up on the federal level at one point, and he's down there with them all now, so. But anyways,
okay.
You have a good day, Philly.
You too,
and $50 million ExxonMobil, that pays for their vacation.
Well, it's not. We're not giving them $50 million. We're just not requiring them to pay $50 million. I know that's an atomic hair split, but that's the issue. Anyway, there you go.
You have a good one.
You too, buddy. All the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And, I've been told that all the standards have been set, whether it be in the European Union. What we're referring to here now is the emissions associated with interaction with public grids, whether it be Nova Scotia or Newfoundland and Labrador, and this is about World Energy GH2 and their final investment decision. It's fine for the standards to be set in the European Union, but they have not been set in Canada. And I know sometimes that feels like a hair split too, but we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So if they don't have a firm, very strict definition of what constitutes green regarding these wind to hydrogen to ammonia and access to a range of 15 to 40% in tax subsidies, obviously it's a big issue. In Nova Scotia, if they need power from the grid, some 58% of their power is generated by coke and coal, versus if World Energy or Everwind or the Exploits Valley Group requires power from our grid, then we have in the neighborhood of 80% renewables. So it's a huge difference. So that issue, I don't know why people poo-poo that. I mean, it's my tax dollar as much as it is yours, and we're talking hundreds of millions of them. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, plenty of time to speak with you on a topic of your choosing. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 10 and say good morning to the Liberal member for Corner Brook. He's the Minister of Immigration, Population Growth and Skills. That's Jerry Byrne. Minister Byrne, you're on the air.
Much for having me on this morning.
No problem. Before we get into whatever you called about this morning, Minister, has the government announced an extension in the gas tax relief that was in place? It's scheduled to go away on the 1st of April? I couldn't recall.
I will have to check on some details. I've been that's just something that should be on the tip of my tongue, but I better be careful and relay that one to the finance minister, Paddy. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I'll confirm it somehow this morning, because that's another 8+ cents added on the 1st of April if there's not an extension granted. So I'll figure it out. Okay.
My apologies. That's a pertinent detail, but I've been kind of captured by some other things within my portfolio, and that is, of course, the federal government, Paddy. This is something I think this is very important for a lot of organizations, but more importantly, a lot of clients, a lot of people who depend on supported employment and employment-related services in our province. The federal government gave formal notice to all provinces and territories of Canada that it is considering removing a portion of the labor market, the employment grants that it provides to provinces and territories to give to organizations and to give to people. These grants have been around in Newfoundland and Labrador since 2007. And there was 8 years ago, there was a small top-up that was given. 8 years ago, it amounts to about $16.5 million plus for Newfoundland and Labrador. What Ottawa has formally informed us of is that they're thinking about taking back the $16.5 million that each and every year from that top-up from 8 years ago. So pretty serious issue for many respects.
So inside that type of monies for persons with disability, is that what we're talking about when we talk about supportive employment?
It's part of that. It's also training money. Like I have to tell you, one of the things that I'm particularly proud of that I decided to use a lot of that money for was eliminating barriers to women to access training. There was a system in place prior to for supported training activities at our colleges and campuses across the province, whereby someone looking to get training had to file their spouse's tax returns, their income statements, and that often was a barrier to women being able to enter into the workforce and to get skills and training in that regard, because, of course, sometimes in a family relationship, you say, listen, we can't really do this because you're not going to get supported. My income is too high. The spouse's income is too high, so therefore you're not going to get support for this. So therefore you can't go into training. Many, many times, Paddy, that fell on women who were not able to get any access to training. So what we did is we eliminated the requirement for spousal income adjustment to be able to get access to training, so that there can be no barriers that would prevent that. So that initiative alone cost $17 million each and every year, and it's worth every penny of it. But plus, we also support organizations that engage in supported employment for people with both intellectual disabilities and people within that are on the autism spectrum. And that is one of the things that we raised money. We raised the amount of support for those organizations from that top-up from 8 years ago that's been in place each and every year for the last 8 years.
Yeah, and some of that money would come in and be earmarked for organizations like the CNIB and Inclusion NL and the various employment centres, and there's
Pull-In, you name it.
Yeah, Open Doors program, Council on Deafness, some of those groups.
Women in resource industries, women to advance, Office to Advance Women Apprentices. That's what some of this money is going to be used, has been used for, which now is in doubt.
This is a statement coming directly from the Federal Department regarding labour market transfers, and here's what it says. Discussions are ongoing regarding labour market agreement top-ups, like the additional $16.5 million Newfoundland and Labrador received in 23-24, which was allocated in Budget 23. However, the core funding of agreements with provinces and territories, including $142 million for the Government of NL, it will absolutely continue. Further, the responsibility for the allocation of those funds will remain with the responsibility of the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. Any suggestion otherwise is simply not true. Your comment.
Confirming everything that I just said. The core funding is not, Ottawa is not entering into a discussion of the funding that was entered into back in 2007, but the funding, the top-up funding that was allocated 8 years ago is in question, and that statement confirms that.
It does.
Discussions are ongoing, as the statement says. So, confirming what I just said, what the federal minister reported to me and to all provinces and territories across the country, they are looking at repatriating that.
Well, I guess we'll find out on the 16th of April, because discussions can happen, but the budget will be tabled in Ottawa on the 16th of April. This is not necessarily directly in your bailiwick, but it kind of is. And it's, when we talk about immigration and newcomers to the province and the need to learn the language and to get a job and to find a home and those types of things, there's a federal program that people are telling me that they're seeing abused time and time again. And it maybe should be some of the onus on your department to ensure this is not happening in addition to your federal counterparts, and that's the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. It's, of course, regulated through the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and the Refugee and Immigration Protection Regulations, but we are being told examples where locals, if you can't find someone to hire locally, then of course you can avail of this, but we're hearing stories of locals being laid off and replaced with workers inside the TFW program. So do you see that? Is that something that should be of concern to you? And if so, what do you do about it?
100%. It's always of concern. Listen, we're all about getting Newfoundlanders and Labradorians first access to jobs. There are jobs that are out there that are available that we do need newcomers to take because the skill sets and the numbers of people in certain jobs are not there. We see help wanted signs right across this entire province. This is different than that, and I'm very happy that you raised it. We're having trouble dealing with the federal government on a number of different issues. For example, I think I should be more engaged or able to be engaged in the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. I am not. I believe that provinces and territories should be able to be more engaged in the allocation or the distribution of work permits. For example, there are students at Memorial University, people that are here, international students. There are no security risks to them. They're already here. They were already given a student permit, a study permit by Canada. They want to renew their work permit post-graduation. I cannot help them. These are the kinds of things, Patty, that there was a decision some time ago, and we'll go back to our first discussion about the labor market transfers. Ottawa took a decision. The Chrétien government took a decision in 1997. It said, we have studied this, we have learned from this. Provinces and territories are the best jurisdictions to decide labor market issues. Ottawa should get out of their way, move on, and they did so, and they created the labor market transfers as they shifted that jurisdiction, that authority to the provinces. Now the federal government is starting to creep back into labor market developments. They're starting to want to take that room back and that money back. So we really do have an interesting time in the Federation right now where Ottawa is moving quickly on international student permits as to the number of students that are able to enter into our institutions, unfairly penalizing Newfoundland and Labrador, in my opinion. They're moving more and more into labor markets, and they refuse to let us into areas which we can really provide value, which is work permits. And decisions about temporary foreign workers. I'm not allowed there.
Yeah, well, as it pertains to international students, it remains to be seen what the impact is here in this province. But I would suggest that we've been misled by Minister Miller, because we talk about the bad actors, these colleges that are, providing woeful education and worthless diplomas, what have you. But it turns out that's not true at all. It's simply not. They scapegoated international students. The news story, as it was written last week, is that the vast majority of these international student visas are at public colleges and universities. So it's not the bad actor issue. So when the government is trying to deflect away its responsibility regarding things like housing, to label one group or another as the problem is obviously quite silly, and is sometimes politically calculated, in this case woefully so, because the proof's in the pudding. The vast majority of the visas are at public universities, specifically in Ontario.
And in British Columbia, where the federal government has said there is a problem. But what I said to the federal government, Mark Miller, and I will commend you openly and notably that you have captured something which I have been trying to say to the federal minister and to our federal MPs. Don't try to fix something which is not broken by applying a prescription to a province which does not bear the burden of the problem. Our provinces, our colleges, both public and our private colleges, are not only some of the most regulated, but they're the best performers in the entire country. Yet a national prescription for a national problem is being applied to our private colleges and our public institutions when there's really no problem. This is a solution in search of a problem, and there's no place for that in our federation.
Fair enough. Let me make a more concise question out of the TFW program before I have to take a break. So I know it's a federal program, but when and if you hear of it and see it, should it be your responsibility to red flag it and bring it directly to the attention of your counterpart up along? Because
whenever there is a concern that is raised, a question of propriety about whether or not living conditions, whether or not the terms and conditions of the temporary foreign workers, if we learn about that, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to inform authorities about that situation so that they can investigate. We do not have investigative powers to be able to go into a workplace, for example, and examine a situation. That flows from the Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Act, and so that's why I have to make that. But bear this and hear this clearly. If we hear of any kind of circumstance which causes us any kind of concern, we will flag that. Absolutely.
When's the last time you did it?
I cannot say to you at this moment, but I remember hearing and reporting a particular situation in central Newfoundland in the fall of last year.
I appreciate the time, Minister. Thank you.
Okay, all the best to you, Paddy. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Jerry Byrne is the Minister responsible for immigration. What's the actual phrase again? Immigration, population growth and skills. Yeah, there you go. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's keep rolling here. Go to line number 6. Say good morning to one of the 4 candidates on the ballot running in the by-election in Ward 4 in the city of St. John's. It's Tom Davis. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
I want to start with, I want to talk about garbage today. And it's obviously an important thing for the city. It's a big expense. And part of the justification for the increase in budget this year was investing in equipment. So I want to start 2 discussions, and one would be about the concept of moving to biweekly garbage collection. We have biweekly recycling, of course, and a lot of communities across the country do it already, where they have biweekly. Ottawa does it, St. John, New Brunswick does it, Peel region, all across the country. They have biweekly garbage collection, and what they find, first of all, with recycling like we have now, it's biweekly, and a lot of people will find, depending on their lifestyles, that they actually generate more recycling than they generate garbage. And they find that when communities go to biweekly garbage collection, recycling increases up to 5 to 6%. That can also obviously result in increased composting too, hopefully, because if people don't, that might encourage people to do more composting because they won't want the smell of the food in their product. If we can increase the education to that as to what is recyclable, that can help. But obviously, when you look at costing, that should decrease fuel use, wear and tear on vehicles, and also requirement for garbage collection vehicles.
Yeah, fair enough, but you're also always going to need a vehicle to collect, whether it be household waste or recyclables. It was not that long ago we were the worst recycling province in the country. Now, of course, recycle is important, but inside the 3 R's, reduce is probably the biggest one. But the recycling numbers, on top of emissions and vehicles and human resources, the more we recycle, the better it is financially for us. The tipping fees for recycling versus household waste are dramatically different. So the more we recycle, the more we save.
100%. Now, there are some residents that may, for very large residences, that may require more collection. In the city of Mount Pearl, I wasn't aware of this, but in the city of Mount Pearl, actually, you can have 2 bins per household, and you pay a fee for that.
Yeah.
These are all things that I believe that before we look at increasing taxes to the residents, we should be having these more complicated discussions on how we can reduce the cost to the city. And on that same line, along the same lines, down at the landfill, we have obviously what happens is so much garbage goes in every day, and then they put a daily cover on it, and then and that cover is blasted rock that we obviously have to pay for, and there's a cost. But in addition, every ton of blasted rock we put in the landfill more quickly fills up the landfill, because that obviously isn't garbage necessarily. So it came to my attention that within the province there's a recycling company that does a lot of metal recycling, and after they drain all the fluids, they remove the batteries, they take the mercury switches, make sure there's no PCBs, all the refrigerants are taken out, all the gasoline drained. And once that's all done, it's ran through a crusher and a shredder, and the metal is then removed and recycled. And incredibly to me, we actually ship this metal all over the world. There's actually a load going to Istanbul, to Turkey, which is hard to wrap your head around, but that's a reality. But what's left over, they call it automobile shredder residue or automotive fluff. And ASR, automobile shredder residue, is what's left over. So that'd be the rubber, some glass, although they do remove most of the glass, some glass, upholstery, foam, rubber, and plastics. And then that is then trucked to the landfill, and the company pays landfill tipping fees for it, and it just gets dumped. Now, all across the country and around the world, ASR has actually improved landfill cover, and it has properties that are actually superior to crushed, to blasted rock. It requires only a quarter of the soil normally, so that obviously reduces the cost and the rate of filling up to the landfill. During heavy periods of rain, the ASR provides better traction for landfill compaction machines, which increases equipment and operator safety. It's less dusty, and also overall it would reduce our costs. So an application was made to be able to use this ASR as cover, and the landfill supervisor was in favor of it. It went through a review with the province, and Department of Environment and Climate Change approved it as a landfill cover. So everything was green lit. And then someone within the city could not find a classification number for the material, and therefore that was the end of it. So we never heard any more of it. It's just a dead issue, and that company now is paying, and it's just getting dumped into the landfill. So, these are the type of things that one of our elected councillors should have made an issue, and we should have been hearing about it. But instead, we're, again, running the city as if there's a blank check, and these type of things don't matter, but they do.
There are no blank checks out there. Shouldn't be. No carte blanche. So, even in the world of the landfill and recycling, what have you, I still have people that send me emails quite cross that we've changed the process, or the policy regarding the transparent bag versus, and you're still allowed to have one black bag in there, so whatever's of concern for you don't want someone at the dump to see whatever you're throwing away, so you're still allowed to have that one privacy bag. But I thought the transparent bags were a good idea. I don't know if anyone's ever opened the top of my bin to see what's inside, but if that encourages more and more people to do what, even if we're just talking about recycling period, I would just suggest that you understand the fact that the recycling drives down our garbage collection fees. So let's see if that can be, something that gets through the heads of folks. And if you don't want it to go into the city and you want to go over to one of the green depots and collect the money yourself, fair enough. But the less we actually throw into the dump, the better off we are financially as tax-paying citizens. So anyway, I get those complaints more than you would believe, because it's been in play for quite a long time now.
Well, and obviously for those of us who really, really, really want to try and reduce how much waste, because to your point, reduce is number one. I mean, and that's what all of us need to look at it. When our garbage is we pay for everything that goes out in the garbage. We pay for directly or indirectly. So these are good things to think about. Obviously, next Tuesday is Election Day. I just want to remind people, if anybody needs a ride on that day, the majority of people are going to send in their ballots, their mail-in ballots. If you don't have one by now, you really want to reach out, go through the process on the City of St. John's, register to vote. But if you bring your ID with you on the 12th, you can do it. If anybody has any challenges, they can reach out to me through Tom Davis NL, and I'll be glad to give them a hand.
Appreciate the time, Tom. Good luck.
Take care, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Don's in the queue. He wants to talk about the gas tax too. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Don, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Back in 2020, March 2020, Fury announced, excuse me, that because the refinery shut down, he's going to put a nickel a litre on petroleum products to help offset having to start up that refinery from zero. Because if you had to shut down and just walk out, it would cost too much to fire it up again.
Yeah, there was two different pots of money. There was money for Warm Ireland, and then there was money for importation and distribution. You're right.
Yeah. So to prevent from doing that, it's like a car. You put it in idle. You don't just turn off the key. Okay, I could buy that. However, it was only going to be until the refinery was sold. Well, come June, he announced that, or September, announced that there were negotiations ongoing for the sale of the refinery, and it was at the time with Irving. Going to keep the tax on until the deal was done. Well, the deal wasn't done, and then you guys, the VOCM, talked to him and asked him, oh, so what about the nickel a litre and the gas? Are you going to take it off? Oh, no, we can't do that. Why? And his reply was, because of competitive reasons. Now, I don't know who in the hell a shutdown refinery is competitive with. But anyways, that's fine. You get to buy into that, I guess. So now that the refinery is sold, I'd like for someone to ask him the question, when is he going to take the nickel a litre off fuel? Or is it just going to be another tax drought, just another lie from the Liberal government? It's like the announcement yesterday at the School for Paradise. Someone trying to tell me that just hit, that light bulb was just turned on shortly after they had the election, and old Freddie there got elected. I don't believe that. And in the meantime, an announcement of that magnitude, they don't have any idea where it's going. They don't have any idea how much it's going to cost. They don't have any idea when they're going to start. They have no idea when the shovel is going in the ground. Excuse me? Is that how you make multi-million-dollar announcements?
No. Just back to Come By Chance for a second, and I'm happy to talk about the high school announcement. I'm just trying to rack my brain for how all that money worked. I don't think there was there wasn't 5 cents put on a litre of fuel for Warm Idle. My recollection was that there was $16 or $17 million directly transferred to keep it in Warm Idle. So it wasn't an additional gas tax issue. It was just money straight out the door. Isn't that how that worked?
Well, the nickel a litre next day went on the gas pumps and all that.
Yeah, and that's the nickel that goes to Silver Peak. So with the North Atlantic Refining Limited, NARL, when they were talking about looking for suitors or potential buyers and the need to keep it in Warm Idle, so for the possibility for someone to buy it, had it been shuttered, it would be less attractive and more expensive. So I think I'm right in saying that at that point the government gave them $16 or $17 million for that particular purpose, as opposed to adding a specific tax to a litre of fuel. I'll confirm that, but I think that's how that worked.
Yeah, well, I know that the way he announced it was that 5 cents a litre will be put on gasoline to help offset having to shut down completely the refinery. So my question to him is, the refinery is sold. He always talks about how expensive carbon tax is and how the federal government should be reducing carbon tax, etc., etc., etc. He wants to help reduce fuel. Take the nickel off now.
Fair enough. We'll put it to him.
Okay, thanks a million.
I appreciate the call. Thanks a lot, Don.
Oh,
Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, someone who's Googling while I try and think and talk and listen, I'm pretty sure that's the way that went. So it was at the beginning of that year that the government specifically gave NARL the maybe $16.5 million or $17 million for the specific purpose that they committed to keep the refinery in what they call warm idle. I think that's how that worked. And so the timing might be curious with the addition of 5 cents on the other side, but that was straight up. And there's more than one 5 cent charge inside the price of a litre of fuel here in this province. It'll be interesting because some of it is somewhat deceiving when you look at the breakdown of what's involved in a tax on a price of fuel, on a litre of fuel. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 31 cents or more. It's in that neighborhood. That's the tax on gas in this province. Some of it's been in place for quite a long time. Like the 10-cent federal excise tax on gasoline, that has never changed since it was first imposed, but that's part of it. And then you'll talk about gas tax, and then you talk about carbon tax, and then you talk about HST on top of all the taxes already firstly applied. So, yeah. Anyway, let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 10. Say good morning to the president of the NDP. That's Mary Shortle. Mary, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
Doing good, too. Thanks. I do want to talk about the Pharmacare Act because it was tabled last week, and I know I was talking about it a little bit earlier, but it's now that it's tabled, I think it's really important that we talk about how this could really be transformative in the healthcare system. But can I first just say, a lot of people have been talking about Brian Mulroney, and I remember when I was an activist, fighting really hard against free trade and against the GST and all the stuff that was happening during his tenure. But I have to say, he's the first working class prime minister I think that this country had, son of an electrician.
Mary, before we move along, can you take us off speaker? It's a bit hollow.
Oh, sorry. Doing that. Sorry, Patty, is that better?
That's much better, thank you.
Sorry about that. Probably the last prime minister to actually be called a progressive conservative. So I heard Richard Cashin the other day talking about him and talking about how he was a prime minister that was very controversial, but whose best interests were always, in his own view, what was good for the country and not for a certain segment of society or for himself. So it is worth acknowledging, the length of time he spent as prime minister and sending sympathies to his friends and family across the country. I just wanted to do that. I think Dad, for example, my father, would have been someone who would have voted for Brian Mulroney as a progressive conservative, because of some of his policies and stuff, but would probably never vote for the current Conservative Party. So I think it's worth recognizing that difference for sure.
If you're going to be in a position such as the Prime Minister, and if controversy is going to follow you, of course it is. I mean, one thing Mulroney did was take big swings at big issues, which also comes with controversy. And, he may indeed be plagued with a couple of things like Airbus, what have you. Mm-hmm. But if you go down the laundry list of what was dealt with, I'm not going to say achieved, but addressed during his tenure, it's extraordinary. I mean, he cancelled the National Energy Programme, Meech Lake, Charlottetown, privatised Petro-Canada, privatised Air Canada, the Acid Rain Treaty, environmental protections, GST, NAFTA. I mean, there's some pretty big stuff in there.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of that as a union activist we disagreed with, but and we had those challenges for sure, right? But it definitely is a different type of leadership, and it's worth mentioning that for sure, I think. Right?
Yeah, and he was at the helm during the Oka crisis, the Gulf War. Yeah. He did settle the Nunavut land claims agreement, which was a big deal at the time too. Mm-hmm. Some 350,000 acres of land, if I remember correctly, somewhere in that neighborhood. So a lot was on the table regarding Brian Mulroney, but he was a decent bloke, and that's sometimes lost in today's modern politics.
And that's what you hear all along, right? I mean, he gave us lots of work as activists, but it is a different type of politics for sure. for sure. But onto the Pharmacare Act, it was tabled last week, and it really is historic, I think, and it's worth talking about and diving a little bit deeper about the possibilities as it passes now, because once it does pass this week or next week, whenever it passes, then the negotiations will start with the provinces and territories to get those funding agreements. I think the good thing about those agreements, and I know we've been talking about this for a long, long time, and in my other life, I remember meeting with premiers of the various provinces and territories around it, and at that time, the premiers, including the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador at the time, were quite in favor of a national pharmacare program and the universality and the single payer of it. So I think this is really important. These conversations that happen, and the fact that the almost 4 million people who suffer from diabetes and 9 million people who can access contraception as the first two things that are coming out of this is really important as well when you think of who it is who's impacted by not being able to afford their medication, gig workers, women, people of lower income, and the people, 1 in 5 people who we know statistically, seniors who aren't taking the medication or who are insufficiently covered by private plans. So it's really exciting to see the House of Commons begin this debate, and it will provide a foundation for a promised universal single-payer pharmacare program.
Yeah, I wonder how that lines up with the intent of the Supply and Confidence Agreement, because universal pharmacare, and even though we're the only country in the OECD with universal healthcare without universal pharmacare, it's not surprising this comes in a staggered or laddered approach. So you begin with diabetes medication and contraception. But here's some of the confusion. When you have big national policy, there's always going to be lots of complexities and lots of questions and lots of grey areas. So inside of this, apparently, so the negotiations with the province are ongoing, even though it hasn't been settled in full in Parliament as of yet. But how does it work when it comes to provincial programs that are already established? For instance, in diabetes medication, there's an insulin pump program in this province. Does that federal plan replace our plan, or how does it get integrated with our plan? So some of those things are really yet to be fully understood.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Don Davies talked the other day and was asked that exact question. And he said, when they start those negotiations, I mean, details aren't out there yet, which is funny for the provinces like Alberta who don't agree with something they haven't even seen yet. But once those negotiations start, that's what they'll be talking about. They also have, according to MP Davis, they will have a committee of experts, and which will include the various parties that will meet to talk about a formulary of drugs. So they're already starting that process as well, and start the process of what it means for bulk buying, what it actually, how much money it actually saves. And we know the provincial or the Parliamentary Budgetary Office said that there would be a single a reduction of overall drug spending right away. And although they estimate the cost high, $11.2 billion for 2024-25 for the cost of implementing this act, they also say that over time it will actually save money, and we know that. We've had those conversations about people and the system, the healthcare system, for example, and the burden on that right now, and the provinces and territories that will save money on that because it will go to a federal agreement that's administered by the federal government or an arm of the federal government, right? So it will, over time, it will take some time, and it's not going to happen overnight. And it will, I believe, require that we continue to advocate for it being universal, single payer, and work with our own provincial governments to try and make sure that they're on board with this as well, like they were years ago. And I don't know where Newfoundland Labrador stands right now. But I know the Health Accord, in one of its recommendations, strongly urged to buy into a federal pharmacare program as well.
Yeah, and it's not going to really feel like universal single payer because there's going to be different relations between the feds and the various provinces. So that's going to make it even more confusing because you might get used to one way that it works in this province and then maybe relocate to Ontario or Alberta or BC or vice versa, and it's a different kettle of fish.
There must have been some transition when Medicare happened from a private program to public sector. There's going to be some growing pains for sure. Yeah. The thing that bothers me about Alberta, for example, I think they're just rejecting the agreement before seeing it because they want to pick a fight with the feds like they've done about all the federal programs, like child care, carbon tax, pensions. There was consultations with them over the periods of time that all this research was being done and the reporting was being done. But I read just yesterday where the Chambers of Commerce in Calgary and Edmonton are all saying back to the Alberta government, and I heard it on Cross Country Checkup on Sunday night with people phoning in and saying for various reasons it makes sense to go to a federal program. One of them is you're pooling resources across the provinces. Because of the ongoing labor shortage and the need to attract talent, the cost to employers, for example, for the cost of them for health benefits, also the financial benefits of pooling, they're recommending to the Alberta government that they buy into it. So, I think it's pretty early days to be saying that this is not going to work for one economy. The other thing is that Alberta doesn't have a provincial public pharmacare plan, and it doesn't plan on having one. So if we're really talking about putting money back in people's pockets, so it's an affordability issue, it's an anti-poverty issue, it's a gender equity issue when we talk about reproductive access to reproductive products, gig workers, that's a group, that sector that's increasing exponentially, and how that will benefit them and benefit the economy and the healthcare system. Sure. It's short-sighted for them to say that without having seen any of the details, I think.
Well, similar to the dental plan, we don't know how it's going to work for people who have private insurance, whether it be that they pay for themselves or it's currently provided by their employer. So there's lots of real grey areas remaining. Alberta and Quebec, their position on this one, it's interesting. Now, it does indeed do away with the bulk buy play, which is a big part of reducing cost. But what they've said, and I don't know how wrong they would be here. I think bulk buy is important, but they're saying, what we're doing is adding additional bureaucracy to administer this program, as opposed to just like in healthcare transfer dollars, where they have to be earmarked for specific things. Like the most recent round was digitization of medical records. Last time it was mental health and long-term care. This could actually be part of healthcare transfer dollar, couldn't it? So that you say, okay, it has to be going towards expanding your pharmaceutical coverage plan, and consequently we do away with that level of bureaucracy, and we still enhance access and affordability of drugs.
Well, I think the basis for a universal single-payer pharmacare program was to remove the bureaucracy, because right now you have fragmented systems right across the country. Everything is different. Some are public, some are private. The Canada Health Act, and putting the Canada Pharmacare Act into the Canada Health Act, which is part of the plan, because it's the government has agreed to the principles of the Canada Health Act, talks about a publicly funded healthcare system that's accessible to everyone, no matter where they live, no matter how much money they make. So you pay with your NCP card or whatever the other provinces have, not your credit card. That's what this Pharmacare Act is supposed to be for every single person across this country. Okay. It's not meant to send money to the provinces so that they can invest in private health care, which we're seeing because the Canada Health Act is very clear, and any type of federal transfers to them through that has strings attached, and one of those strings is that it has to be a public system.
Yeah, I guess that string could be attached in this one as well. Mary, I'm extremely late for the break, but I appreciate the time. We'll see where this debate on pharmacare goes. And we know where it's going to go. It's going to be passed. And then we'll see what the next play is regarding the other types of pharmaceuticals that will be added to the federal plan. Good to have you on the show, Mary.
Thanks, Patty. We'll touch base again. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Mary Shirtle is the president of the NDP. Let's take a break. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one and say good morning to the spokesperson for the Lecturers Union of Memorial University of Newfoundland, and that's Alison Coffin. Good morning, Alison. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. It's good to hear from you.
It's good to have you on the program. So obviously, overwhelmingly, your members have voted in favor of job action. So 75% of the 200 members voted, 90% voted in favor of job action. So this is a bit of a tangential question, but given all the deferrals and the lack of communication between the university and your union, has that poisoned the well to the point where even if this most updated offer is in line with the rest of Atlantic Canada, we've got this philosophical distance between the two that's going to be hard to patch up, because that seems to be the feature of the day at Memorial University in the recent years?
We'd like to think that our negotiations are going reasonably amicably. Certainly, conversations across the table have been going kind of well. And both sides, I mean, we're certainly open to offers for sure. And you know, the employer certainly seems to be receptive to ours. So I don't think we're into the poisoned well part right now. I mean, yes, our members and our bargaining team are a little frustrated. There has been a number of things that are irritating, but I think we can overcome those. We just need to come together and start talking sensibly about paying our members appropriately for the work that we do for the university. That's where we are now.
Is there any actual difference in the job description and responsibilities of members of your lecturers' union versus members of the faculty association?
Yes, absolutely. Our union, we can only teach up to a maximum of 2 courses per semester. So we're capped there. So we can, you know, some of us will teach a part of a course. Say perhaps if you're in the music faculty and you're being brought in to do something very specific, you can do a part of a course. Other instructors can teach, say, a course and a lab, and that can be weighted at 1.5, or some of us can get, you know, 2 separate courses. The faculty association now kind of has 2 separate streams. One stream is that full-time faculty. These are the tenured professors, and their employment contracts include teaching a set number of courses. So usually they're between 4 and 6, depending on what faculty they're in. But they also have a component for service, and they have a component for research. And that's the full-time tenured track professors. The reason they went on strike last year was because they were trying to get better employment conditions and pay for their more tenuous instructors, which are the teaching term appointments. So those are the folks that will get anywhere between a 9-month to a 3-year contract, and their only responsibility is exactly like ours. Their only responsibility is to teach, which is exactly what we do. We only teach. We have no service. We have no research requirements. So we are quite comparable to what they do. And so it's quite reasonable to have some expectations that, you know, if we're doing exactly the same thing, we'd kind of like a comparable wage package.
Fair enough. You know, part of the Faculty Association concern as well, in addition to paying protection for those folks in tenuous positions, is that they were talking about collegial governance. You know, specifically seats on the Board of Regents, more say in the governance of the university. Is that something that's on the Lecturers' Union agenda as well, or is this simply about pay?
Certainly, we have been looking for more collegial governments, and we're talking about maybe getting an actual voting seat on Senate. We'd certainly like to be represented at the Board of Regents. Those are important things, and we think that we can have a very important contribution. We've been identified by other bodies at the university as having a very significant role in the development of curriculum and being significant parts of the university community. We have an important role to play. But we are far more concerned about wages at this point. Remember, our last contract was in 2018. It was up in 2020. We gave them a year's extension to September 2021. So now we're looking at negotiating our wages from 2021 sometime into the future. We are open to considering a longer-term contract if that's going to provide the university with a little bit of stability. However, that longer-term contract is really going to need to be an appropriate pay level for us.
Or to be attached to CPI or something, because that's one of the concerns.
Lovely, yeah.
That's one of the concerns you're saying, is that even some of the offers haven't kept up with the pace of inflation, which really means, like the rest of us, my purchasing power is vastly reduced given some of these inflationary concerns, and it's more than inflation. So inside this offer, the most recent one from the university, increase of some 25 to 46%, depending on, you know, your status as a lecturer, a per course instructor. First blush, what do you make of these numbers? Because we're talking about a bump of $5,000 $5,000 per semester for the folks at the bottom of the income scale, up to $73.12, and of course different numbers for those that are making $58.75. Is there an initial reaction coming from the group before you even formally sit down, negotiate it, recommend or not to your members?
Well, we've actually responded to that financial proposal, and we were less than pleased with that. It was rather disappointing because what they've done is the university's kind of mixing together a lot of different rationales, and it's kind of like they're working with this decision-based evidence making. So they come up with a number and they say, well, how can we justify it with this, and try and convince other people that this is a good idea. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. Our first scale. So say for example, if you were to want to start teaching at Memorial University right now, you would be paid $5,000 for that first course. Now, that's been the same since, I think, 2015, so our next to last contract. That stayed the same for 2018. And then, of course, as you do more courses, your pay will go up with that. For those of us who are at the top of that, so if we've taught 15 courses, we're at the top of that pay scale. Many of us started at that top pay scale, and that was $5,875. We've been at that pay scale since 2018. So all of the inflation that we've seen since then, and like I say, it's been huge. Our pay has been eroded as a result of that. And plus, we've not even had incremental steps, not even notional steps of here's 1% and here's 1% along the way. So from there, we're already starting really, really far behind what would be an optimal pay level. The universities offer. They've kind of, I think they've arbitrarily chosen what they want to call our comparators, and they've chosen Atlantic Canada universities. Now, Atlantic Canada universities tend to be paid quite a bit lower than all across Canada for a couple of different reasons. There's a lot of competition happening, all of those things. So that is, first off, an inappropriate comparison because, of course, our members can travel anywhere, and we can also teach online. So if you're going to compare us to other universities in Canada, you need to compare us to all of the other universities in Canada, not just some of the universities in Canada, because it makes it really easy to pick and choose who you want to compare it to make your offer sound better than perhaps it actually is. The other thing that they've done then is the salary scale that they did suggest, which is the one they put out on Newsline, which happened actually before we actually had a chance to respond to that. So, that was a little frustrating from our perspective. But that offer is actually mapped to what they call the overflow rate for MUNFA tenure track professors. So those are the ones that are expected to do research and service, and then they have 4 to 6 courses that they teach each year. So their offer was to map their overflow rate to us. So that's that $68.90 that they're offering in 2020. They conveniently forgot to actually offer anything for 2021 when our contract was actually expired. So they've missed a whole year of pay increases and then mapped this overflow rate on top of it. And then compared it to the Atlantic Canada universities. But on top of that, which is, somewhat insulting, is that overflow rate, they discounted by vacation pay. So normally you'd get your pay and then, you have 4% vacation pay on top of that. Well, what they've done is said, well, you can have the overflow rate, which really only compensates you for a part of a course, not the full course, and then they've discounted it by the vacation pay on top of that.
Yeah, that's accounting tricks. Alison, I'm really late for the news, but we can pick this up again another day as the negotiations continue. How's that sound?
I would like that very much. I'm actually in the boardroom right now. We're hopefully getting an offer in the next, half hour. Perhaps I can update you first thing tomorrow morning.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Alison Coffin, spokesperson for the Lecturers Union of MUN. Let's take a break.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Burjo-Lapoil. He's the Minister of Industry, Energy and Technology, Andrew Parsons. Minister Parsons, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay, sir. We understand that you're in Toronto attending the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada. Just want to give some big numbers for folks for context for the first question. So, Price of lithium fell in 2023 82.3%. Nickel dropped 29.1%. Cobalt 38.5%. Manganese some 22.3%. Given the thirst for these minerals, what are you hearing in terms of conversation there? Because is this an economic anomaly? Is it an economic hangover? Or is there a surplus in the market? What are people saying?
Well, I mean, certainly there's people more equipped than me to talk about the stock market fluctuations and the volatility, but there's no doubt. And in fact, I was having a chat with some of the guys last night, Steve from Benton, Tim from Sokoman. They are, they're getting hammered right now on the stock prices. But I can't say what's the driving factor here. But it's making it tough because right now raising capital, which is always the main goal here, to get the money to continue on with exploration and development, is tough. It is a tough market right now. But thankfully, at the end of the day, it does come down to the resource itself. How much do you have, and all these other factors. So we're strong on certain sides there, but doesn't matter where you are in the world. If the market's down, the market's down, and you got to be able to hang tough and hopefully be able to recover.
Some people are making a relationship between the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and the billions of dollars in tax credits and subsidies available here. So as a result of well-intended legislation, they're looking like there's going to be a surplus of these minerals in this particular calendar year. Consequently, downward pressure on prices, like is the nature of the beast, period. So have we kind of got out over our skis a little bit in this country regarding these types of tax subsidies? Because then everybody and their dog, from juniors to the big players, want to get involved, and consequently the market is flooded with the minerals. So did we kind of outstep ourselves a little bit?
No, I don't think so. I think these are the types of things that happen, and they continue to happen year over year for many years. I still think that we're going to be in a good space. I'm like anybody else. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you when things will change. But look, the reality is that these commodities, these minerals, are going to be required going forward. There is no change, and there's only so many places that have them. So I'd like to think we're in a good spot. But like anything, when the market goes down, it makes it extremely tough for these people. They've got to sort of hang on and hope for the best. And, those that are holding the stocks have to figure out, how long can I hang on there? But overall, in the big, I guess the scheme of it, I think we're in a fine place, and I'm not super, super worried. And most of these people seem to, they take it as it comes. I mean, they say, look, it's a difficult time right now, but we'll be fine. We can persevere through this.
So you'd be in Toronto trying to make the investors aware of who we are, what we have, and investment in the province. Are you getting cool reception given some of the volatility and the prices? Because you're right, we're one of the few democratic countries on the face of the earth. If we're talking about the 31 rare or critical minerals, we've got like 27 of them. So has there been a cool reception to investment given the prices?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, the reception that we are getting is phenomenal, and so I was actually saying this to some of the people I was talking to last night. I wish you could hear it directly from them instead of me saying it. They're talking about how amazing it is to do business in Newfoundland and Labrador when they just talk about the permitting process. It's something that occasionally I hear complaint from. When you go through this, it does take time. But then they were showing me from graphs from down in the states, in certain U.S. states, the process they had to go through. And I'm looking at it, oh my God, how do you get through that? They appreciate the stability that we have. When you look globally, yesterday meeting with Saudis, meeting with Japan, meeting with India, they know the product that we have, and there's a huge amount of interest. Particularly, one of the things when you mention critical minerals is that we were the first jurisdiction in the world to say that our iron ore, which is high grade, is low impurity, we're going to say that that's a critical mineral. We were followed by Quebec, and now we're advocating for the feds to include that. It is amazing when we talk about green steel and the possibilities there. People are extremely interested in Labrador and what we have going on there and the possibilities. So I got to say, I'm extremely bullish and extremely optimistic about the possibilities.
Well, let's pick this conversation up after the break. I know you said that that's okay by you, because I'd like to know more about the type of interest in the province, because there's lots of different moving parts there. It's access to power and a variety of things. So we'll pick that up right after the break. Work for you, Minister? Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and put the Minister on hold, and we'll come back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's rejoin our conversation with Minister Parsons on 2. Minister, you're back on the air.
Sounds good. Let it go.
Okay, so the level of interest in the province gives you reason to be optimistic. How often is this particular question addressed? For mining operations, it's not only permitting and staffing and what have you, it's access to power, of which they need a ton of it. How do you broach that particular issue? Because for massive mining expansion at this moment in time, we don't have the power.
That is absolutely the number one question in Labrador, is the access to new power. And the fact is that we need it. All of these companies that are talking expansion and the opportunities there, they need it. So that's the biggest thing that we're working on. And hopefully there's going to be some developments, I'm talking within days, in terms of moving forward with a study where all the partners, anybody who's interested, has an opportunity to be a part of the study. Say, okay, what is it you need? What is it you're willing to pay? Because the other part of it too is it's one thing to say you need it, but you have to say that you're going to be willing to pay for it. So Newfoundland Labrador Hydro is moving forward. That was a big conversation last week when we were in Lab West, when we were in Wabash for the summit, and Jennifer Williams spoke on it. So, look, absolutely, it's the number one question that everybody's talking about. Now it's just a matter of figuring out, what is the right step forward, because we're not talking small initiatives here. We're talking extremely, extremely expensive developments here. So we have to make sure that we know what we're doing, so we can get the timelines right, get the costs right, and make sure that everybody who wants to be a part of it can, but will also be responsible.
Doesn't how much someone's willing to pay for power also have to include where the power comes from?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that, there's different opportunities there. And again, to be honest with you, is a level of complication that's probably better answered by someone like Jennifer Williams or Walter Parsons over at Hydro. But yeah, we got to figure out where does it come from, and what's the cost of each particular route. What is the different operational side of that? But the good news, and again, I try to put a silver lining on everything here, is that we're here talking about everybody wanting to expand, wanting to create jobs and opportunity, the fact that we're going to get bigger. And we have these opportunities and possibilities there. We have the power there. It's just about which one do you develop, how does each one work, what are the intricacies of each development.
So you seem to be hinting at additional generation. Is that what you're saying is coming in the next couple of days, some information regarding expansion of power generation? No. So basically what we're talking about here, and it's not, again, I wouldn't say it's a huge news item. In fact, Jennifer spoke about it and I spoke about it in Labrador last week. What we're basically doing is a study led by Hydro, where we're working with all the different people that might be interested in new power and power needs. They're going to be a part of this study to figure out what is the right way forward. So that's starting extremely soon. And again, as far as I'm concerned, it's never fast enough, because, when I'm meeting with these different big-time players in Labrador, they're all talking about the need for more power. And, we're talking about 8-10 year developments here. So we need to move forward. I mean, it's going to take some time. So the decisions we make today are going to have a pretty big impact 8 to 10 years from now. Am I getting ahead of myself in thinking that this might mean something regarding 2,225 megawatts further up the river?
I would not put that out there, Patty, because that is not that there's not going to be any announcement on that anytime soon. But Gall is absolutely a big conversation. But as I say to everybody, there's a lot of different players to that. And it's certainly not just government. We have Indigenous leaders and partners in government that need to be a part of that. But again, Gall is it's one of the best undeveloped hydro options in North America. It's hard not to discuss it. But when you're discussing that, it's an extremely complicated piece that requires a lot of different partners. So I wouldn't want to And again, this is where I'm not getting it over my skis. I don't think you're going to hear any announcement on that anytime soon. And it certainly won't be led by me. There's bigger players than me that will talk about that.
And you talk about Indigenous relations. The Inuit Nation is quite clear. With the most recent $5.2 billion rate mitigation plan that was brought forward, that costs them about $1 billion. They say unless that's addressed, there'll be no approval granted for development at Gull. So that's interesting tangle to be discussed or better understood.
They, like I say, they're here as well in Toronto. They're at PDEC because they have a huge role to play in the mining opportunities and power opportunities in Labrador. So yeah, there's a lot of conversations happening on that, but again, that's probably a little bit bigger than my pay grade. I'll leave that to the premiers and the Indigenous leaders, and I'll just continue to sort of promote Newfoundland and Labrador mining.
Can you give us some sort of status update in the 2041 conversation? Because I'm not expecting anybody to show their cards in full and, transcripts from daily meetings. We understand there's been 5 out-of-province meetings at this point. In Quebec, they're really vocal on this stuff. Premier Legault talks about Gull all the time. I mean, 15% of Hydro-Quebec's portfolio involves the Upper Churchill, so they need something to happen here. Can you give us a status update?
So the best thing I can say is that it's absolutely an active conversation. We've got our committee that's handling, we'll say, the negotiations. There are times when I think Premier of Quebec loves to troll. He puts out a tweet saying we're talking about it, and it gets everybody's dander up. The fact is that, look, I think there's a solution space to be had, but when that happens, I'm sure everybody will be notified. I mean, the minute you think of it, like sometimes I'm even nervous about even having a loose conversation, because the minute you mention it, it becomes a House of Assembly question. Oh, what's going on there? It's all secret. What I would say to people, look, this is a generational opportunity. There's a huge opportunity, and I think we are absolutely in the driver's seat, and I trust the committee and I trust the Premier to continue on. So I don't have anything new to report, but I certainly wouldn't want to start up the opposition's questions today saying we're up here having secret negotiations or any of that foolishness.
Yeah, well, again, I don't expect the transcript from the meetings. Is there some sort of considered timeline for when we will be updated, though? Because, there's a lot on the line here, and 2041 is really a blink of an eye away. So whether it be redress of the past from 69 to today and what it looks like in 41, so there's got to be some time pressures here. Do we have a timeline?
Look, I'm certainly not in a position to communicate a timeline. That's, I'll leave that to the Premier and the negotiating team. They're working day to day. And that's the thing, is that this is such a big issue that it requires a lot of specialized expertise and people. So I don't have anything to report on that. But what I would say is that, yes, this is massive, and 2041 is certainly a lot closer than we think. But we feel that we're in a good position, so we're not going to jeopardize it by saying, well, it has to be done by this time or that time. Look, all we want, and I think we all recognize, the Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, that this is a big deal, and we're going to do what's right, and we're going to try to make up for, certainly the last number of decades of feeling like we're around. How that pans out in terms of the specifics, we'll see, but there's no lack of pressure or, I think, sort of feeling like we don't get the magnitude of it.
Yeah, we need an economic win here, and I would suggest there's a political victory required for your governing party. Last one. This might be better served asked of Jennifer Williams, but as the minister responsible, what's your role in talking about these win proposals and interaction with the public grid? Because there's another conversation about how much someone is willing to pay for power and sell power back to the grid. So what's your role here? I know that Jennifer Williams and Hydro are evaluating the forecasted demand and whether it be 150 megawatt generator at Holyrood or whatever we're talking about. But what's your role with those wind plays and interaction with the grid?
Well, certainly, we're aware. And look, I'm the first one to recognize that I don't come from an electrical engineer background. We have a full team within the department that deals with that on an everyday basis, as well as the fact that Hydro is the main player, we'll say. We're cognizant, we're aware, we deal with it, but we entrust Newfoundland Labrador Hydro to work with the companies themselves when we talk about what are the possibilities here in terms of what are their power demands, and in the future, what's the ability for us to interact with the grid in terms of providing it. It's like anything, it comes down to cost. What is the cost of doing that? And that's one of the biggest issues with renewable powers. We all want it, but globally the challenge is, are we willing to pay for it? Are we willing to pay for what green energy costs? And that's the balancing act now. So I guess to answer the question, certainly we're aware, we're kept in the loop, but we entrust Newfoundland Labrador Hydro to handle that, and then you throw in the PUB as well. They play a role in that down. So that's probably the best answer I have.
Okay, two very quick ones. We talked about the fact that the province is not going to pay for any expansion of the grid to accommodate World Energy, GH2 or otherwise. It's going to be their bill. But insofar as the conversation we've had a little bit in the past is decommissioning costs. So, when we look at orphaned wells, what have you, it's been a real burden for provinces and the federal government. How do we put the money in place? So is there going to be an upfront bond of a forecasted percentage of decommissioning, or how are we going to put that money in place so that we're not chasing at the end?
So we're literally working through that right now, and it's absolutely an active consideration, and it was even a part of the process talking about, what are end-of-life plans. And I think we've got a good system in play. I mean, one of the issues is not an issue now, but was an issue, not so much in the oil field, but was in mining. I mean, end-of-life and reclamation and things like that, and remediation. So long and short is this. Look, we know that when it's end-of-life, it's going to cost. We, as taxpayers, do not want to bear the burden, so it's going to be on them, full stop. Right now, though, it's about figuring out the language for the regulations to make that happen, but we've communicated that, and now it's just a matter of the actual people behind the scenes working to make sure the language happens before anything is actually up and running. So it's not. I can't say it's something that causes me stress every day, because I feel very strong in our position and comfortable, and it's not a worry I have for that. My kids and grandkids are going to be paying for this stuff.
Will there have to be an organized and negotiated commitment there before there's a final green light or approval?
Yes, look, we want this in place. We're not going to say, well, I'm sure we can deal with it later. Let's make sure it happens. No, we're going to want that done before operation. We're going to want people to know that. And again, we're not going to. I never trust anybody to pay the money. That's just how it is. So we're going to want that money or that bond or that security in place for later on.
Last one. When you talk about the interest in investing in the province regarding the exploration and the production of minerals, what's the conversation sound like regarding secondary processing or tertiary processing? Because we do a poor job of that in this country. We're good at R&D, but we're bad at monetizing it. Same thing we are with good at producing stuff. We sell it, we ship it elsewhere, then we buy back the final product. So any talk about that requirement or that need or possibility?
That's absolutely a top-of-mind conversation, and this is where I throw a shout-out to the boss. Every time I've been in meetings with these big players and the premiers there, he makes it very clear when we talk about electrons going out of province, when we talk about ore going out of province, those days are ending. We need to do a better job. How that works in terms of the specifics obviously requires a lot of negotiation and conversation and figuring that out. But we recognize that historically we have not done, and I'm not talking about we, I'm talking about the royal we here, everybody over the last number of decades, we need to do more. So it's a big conversation. So when we're talking about, rare earths in Labrador, when we're talking about different opportunities there, one of the things we are talking about, including iron ore up in Lab West, we're talking about the possibility of making sure that the processing is happening here so that we get that value add. So absolutely, that's a conversation, and we make sure that it's clear with everybody that we need to find a way to do more.
Appreciate your time as usual. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Andrew Parsons, Minister in Industry, Energy, Technology. Let's take a break. When we come back, the province's Auditor General, Denise Hanrahan. Don't go away.
Saturday morning, join us for the Irish Newfoundland Show. Send your request to irishnl@vocm.com or submit them online at vocm.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the province's Auditor General. That's Denise Hanrahan. Good morning, Denise. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So you've been waiting for some 3 years for more information regarding the province's role in the oil industry. What exactly are you looking for?
So we're looking for information on the decommissioning of wells, specifically looking for an estimate and for the province to be able to either disclose or record it as need be.
So this is a bit of an odd question, but what do you do with that information? Because a price tag, which will be fluctuating regarding, the time frame when it happens and our various responsibilities regarding the different percentage of equity stakes. So what do you do with the info even when you get it, or when you get it, or if you get it?
So there would be particular guidelines around with respect to whether it should be recorded actually in the statements as an expense or whether it should be disclosed in the notes. But it is important from our point of view that those financial statement disclosures actually include information for readers, the public, to see if there are commitments related to the decommissioning of those wells. And even if the amount is estimates, we have lots of estimates in the province's financial statement. But this is something we've been asking now for a few years, and we continue to hear hear that they're continuing their work, and we're making suggestions that there are ways to get that information and that we'd like to see the issue concluded.
Is there any reason to believe we wouldn't have some financial responsibility? Because when you have an equity stake, it's not just about profitability, it's also about liability at the end. So we obviously would certainly have some responsibility, don't we?
We would understand that there is a lot of complexity in the calculation. I think there's toing and froing in the number with respect to that, but I'm sure the Department of Finance would know more. Our issue is more about finding out if there is an appropriate disclosure, because at this point we've been told they have no estimate at all, and certainly that's something we think that needs to be pursued.
Have they given you some sort of status update as to the work that's ongoing, or they simply don't have it?
They just keep telling us that they're working to get the figures and information, but they've said that to me now for a few years.
So is that stalled, do you think, because of the oil companies or the operators? Because in these arrangements, the operators really hold the vast majority of the cards, so the numbers coming from them versus the province being able to create them, or do you think the province should be able to create them on a standalone basis?
We understand that those producers do have estimates of the numbers in their financial statements. They are required to record something. Whether that number would be a basis for the province or could inform the province on their process, we would hope that is one avenue that they certainly could look at, and there's lots of ways to do that. But we're just encouraging the province to close the circle here, that we think that their potential here is that there's something that's material and it should be disclosed.
Fair enough, and we'll see what we can figure out on that front as well. And I guess that's a combination of Minister Parsons and Minister Cody and maybe even others and the Treasury itself to talk about that number. Anything else on that front before I have another couple of questions for you?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, so the last report you brought forward, and it was deemed scathing because it absolutely was, looking at Memorial University. One of the real strange areas that you highlighted was the lack of a general understanding of the org chart, the organizational chart. Some 36 positions sampled, 35 of them, 97%, did not have a position description. Shortly after you and I had that conversation, we had Interim President Neil Bowes on this program, and he gave us what was the update regarding these position descriptions or job descriptions. Are you satisfied with what you heard from Dr. Bowes on that front?
No, I appreciate that Memorial has taken our report seriously, and we know there's been a variety of dialogue and actions on a variety of things that we mentioned in our report. Our norm now is to give the university time to do their pieces of work with respect to our recommendations, and it's not something that we would look back on yet. We usually give them 3 years to fully implement, and we start reporting publicly in 2. But I am happy to hear that they have worked down through some of these recommendations, and certainly appreciate that there is going to be a work involved and that they're started.
Yeah, but even recommendations that came from their own internal audit in February 2020 and 2021 remain outstanding. So let's hope that this report was the impetus to make sure that this work is done. So we'll see. What's next? I can't remember. I'm trying to scratch my brain here to figure out where you're going next. What are you working on now?
So we have 8 audits currently that we're doing in the performance space. Of course, we have a whole slate that we do annually on financial audits. And we have 3 reports coming hopefully before the summer. One will be an update on the status of recommendations from previous performance audits, and as you just mentioned about Memorial, trust that I'll be back every year for 7 years talking about those recommendations and the status. I don't go away, so that report is coming soon. And then we have 2 performance audits specifically, one into oil co-operations. I think you and I chatted about that before. That one was kind of like the tail end of Nalcor because there was pieces that were carved off, and so we're nearing conclusion now on finishing that audit, and that'll be coming out. And then we're also have an audit coming out with respect to MHA expenditures.
Yeah, and not to give formerly Nalcor any credit, but your report regarding compensation was taken seriously, and Jennifer Williams actually made some moves on it, removing bonuses and putting some pay back in, I guess, lockstep with some reasonable issues, reasonable rates. I know that you've been written, say, by various MHAs, and it's been part of the public discourse regarding all the kerfuffle about travel nurses. Some MHAs have asked for you to get involved in an examination of the letting of the contract, sole source as it was. Is your office going to take up the charge on that front?
So we're actively assessing that topic. As I just mentioned, we've got 8 performance audits, the most offices ever taken on. We've got a audit we're doing on behalf of public accounts into personal care homes and long-term care homes, and we've got a variety of other ones. So we have a lot going on right now, but we do know we've got 2 going to go out the door, and so there is an opportunity there. Right now, our understanding is the province has engaged a comptroller general to look at the travel nurses. So there's a piece of work that's ongoing, and I guess, from my point of view, if you know something something is not going right, you don't need to wait for me, because I do tend to be at least a year before I come out. But for us, we have had numerous requests, and to be honest, very thankful when the public and other members of government say that they would like my office to look at something, because that reinforces for me the independence and the value of my office. But certainly we would be looking at, the provision of third parties, because we have had requests related to P3s, particularly the highway concept of maintenance. We've been asked about ambulances and those types of things. So we've had lots of queries around the use of third-party contractors to provide public service. And if we were to go down that road, we certainly would want to make sure that we scoped it in such a way that we could come back with something that was tangible and valuable and in a reasonable amount of time, which for us is no more than a year after we started.
How does your office take the approach of what to take up? Because, if you talk about the value of contracts or the sole sourcing of contracts or the dollar value or the public interest, how do you evaluate what you're going to do next? I mean, is there some sort of checkbox that you go down, or is it simply just pick what you think you can handle at the time?
So we do a process where we look at the impact of the topic, the financial scale and scope, let's say, of the topic. If it's an auditable topic, if it's something that we think we can do in a reasonable amount of time, because sometimes topics are really large, so we try to break them down into scope and size. We do have a running list of topics that are either refreshers from audits we did 5-10 years ago and need to get assessed again, audits that the public have asked us to look into, current topics where there's issues been come up with, let's say, procurement or something like that. So we do have a master list where we go through that. We do work and discuss with other jurisdictions in Canada what work they're doing, because sometimes if they've done an audit ahead of us, we can do one more efficiently by using some of the tools they've used. So we try to make it as efficient and effective as we can. But sometimes, even when we have a bit of a roadmap and we know where we're going, sometimes topics come up and we go, we need to do that next. And sometimes work that gets imposed on us, be it by Cabinet or the House or the Public Accounts Committee, can also adjust. So we've accepted for the Public Accounts Committee the personal care home topic and long-term care home. That audit is going to be in two pieces. It's going to take us about 2 years, but I think it will be a valuable piece of work. So there is some art and some science, I guess, to be fair, but certainly we are always open to topics people suggest, and we certainly do not predetermine where we will go. We do assess it as we get ready, and that's the active process we're in now, that we would hope in the next few weeks to be able to identify the next two we're doing, and then come the fall, going into the winter, when we conclude the other ones that we have going on, because we have RNC and Crown Lands and all kinds of other topics, then we'll bring on more.
I hate bouncing back, but I'm going to do it anyway. With the travel nurse issue, do you think it's an appropriate first step to bring the comptroller in? Because that's basically the role when they talk about procurement. And would your office be duplicating work that the comptroller can actually do?
So in the past, sometimes the province has gone through the comptroller basically to get to internal audit, and internal audit will do an assessment. If internal audit finds that they have a challenge or something that they can't do and they feel the topic requires my office, lots of times we've had files moved from them to us, and so it's cooperative. Sometimes, my act allows me to do things that may not be able to do or whatever. So certainly sometimes, internal audit is a very logical first place to go. But I guess in this particular case, when you talk about procurement and you talk about the sole source contract and those types of things, it is very possible that what internal audit finds may be sufficient information in order for the department to be able to act on something or remedy something or find a solution. Normally, we would not want to duplicate work. That's not a very efficient or good use of public funds. But sometimes we do piggyback. And so depending on what their assessment, let's say, of travel nurses is, may trigger us into a different direction with respect to, say, third-party vendors or something that's a bit wider or something like that, similar to other jurisdictions.
Last one, this one from a listener. What about an audit a few years ago regarding the Department of Transportation not having adopted a procurement policy for ferries in particular?
Yeah, so that was the audit that we did on behalf of the Public Accounts Committee, and actually will be in our upcoming report on the status of recommendations, because we did recommend some processes in amongst with respect to procurement of ferries, and certainly that's where that one came in, but that was a PAC requested report, and we are following those recommendations in our reports.
Always appreciate your time, Denise. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Province's Auditor General, Denise Hanrahan. Final break of the morning. When we come back, gold mining. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Amir, you are on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
Paddy, first of all, thank you for taking the call, and the way you and Dave, you are like a sponge, and man, the way you observe all kind of colors, that's a great temperament and great job.
Thanks a lot, Amir.
Paddy, I'm right now. I'm sitting in Ontario, between Sudbury and Timmins, in a gold mine, Go Gama. It's a Cote gold mine.
Okay.
And I would like to say we all want to live in the gold mines of our own province and contribute in our own province. I'm not a little. We all missing you. We have one Nova Scotian brother with us, and we are 7 Newfoundlanders here. And they all saying thanks to you, and they all appreciate your work and the way you handle every color. So that's the message from everyone. And Newfoundland gold mine, it's any idea when those mines are going to be running at full RPM?
Well, not really. There are gold mines that are currently active and in production and talking about expanding, but there's some massive gold finds here. Newfound Gold, Marathon Gold, Calibre Mining. So there's gold here. There's gold in them there hills, as they say. So it's certainly an active and very prosperous mining opportunity, no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's sometimes I'm not a politician, but I don't know, maybe one day my brain will infected with politician virus, and yeah, man, I would like to, the way we need to have some of the natural resources of Newfoundland. Literally, some countries in the world, they don't have those natural resources or the abilities to know and to track them up to that level that reaching those resources are not very expensive. Luckily, as a Canadian, we have a lot of latest technology in every regard. I don't want to open a Pandora box of oil industry, which I love, and the way we handle Newfoundland offshore, it's a different topic. So yeah, hopefully one day we all able to get the maximum benefit of the natural resources, which we already know. Even a layman knows some of the natural resources like gold, oil in Newfoundland and all that. So let's all pray for the prosperous Newfoundland, and just want to say thanks to you. And next time my friend Jason Carey is going to call.
Fantastic.
About Bank of Canada.
Terrific. I'm looking forward to the call. Thanks for doing this morning, Amir.
Thank you, buddy. Have a good day, and thanks again.
My pleasure. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There we go. Gold was first discovered in this province somewhere in the 1860s or 70s out of Mings Bight. And there has been some production ongoing. There was a stall in operations for quite a long time.
So, Andrew, how's the big smoke?
Oh, but now it's back with a vengeance. So, like Calibre, talking about 300,000 ounces per year. Marathon Gold, big find there. The other gold company that I'm trying to think of that I can't recall the name just off the top of my head, but yeah, gold is absolutely a big play here in the province. So let's check in on the Twitter box. Where VOCM Openline, you know what to do. Follow us there. So this gentleman asked me, do we know who the negotiators are dealing with the province of Quebec regarding 2041? And yes, we do. So the committee was struck. It's led by Carl Smith, who's got a wealth of experience in industry. Jennifer Williams, of course, the president and CEO of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. And Dennis Mahoney is also on the team. He's the Deputy Minister of Justice and Public Safety. And Nathan here says, the fishery is the backbone of this province and has fallen through the cracks. Fishermen gather confederation with no immediate intention to try to change the policies that have choked us for too long. We talk about new industries while the old ones we have slowly die. Well, we actually promoted the protests, and we had the FFAW on, including Mr. Pretty and Mr. Spingle. We had the association on. We hear from harvesters on a fairly frequent basis here. We haven't forgot about the fishery in this studio on this show. We talk about redfish allocation and what's coming down the pike. We talked about the offshore scallop issue and OCI selling off their interest in the offshore scallop. So and like I try to remind folks, if it's important to you, good enough for me. So I bring up topics, I try to bounce them around from day to day to try to keep it as fresh as possible, as opposed to being as redundant as I could be sometimes. So if the fishery is something that you don't think it's enough attention, I'm going to put the onus back on you, the listener and the potential caller. If you want it back on the front burner, you can do exactly that. Grab the pot by the handle, put it on the front burner, we'll have a chat about it. All right, our email address is openline@vocm.com. And good show today. Big thanks to all hands who support the program, all of the callers, listeners, emailers, tweeters. You're all right. And we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM in Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.